Welcome to episode 35, Colleen Bertino of the Great Northern Sexcast. How are you?
I'm doing great this morning.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous day out.
It is a very, very beautiful day. Liz Tillemans is along for the ride. Hey, Liz.
Hey.
And so you, Colleen, have the distinct honor of introducing our in-studio guest today. We're thrilled.
Well, there's been a lot going on, and I'm always wanting to have someone in that actually teaches sex education, versus me blathering around about my opinion. So today we have Chuck Nikles. Okay, yep. Chuck Nikles from Normandale College. We met a few minutes ago, but I do know that we have a mutual friend, Dave, who used to teach the same course at Normandale Community College. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you end up with teaching this particular subject?
Well, I've always had an interest in sexuality. I'm actually a personality psychologist, so
Okay.
I specialized in that particular area in grad school, got my PhD at the U of M, and then actually the very next, so I graduated in December of 2004,
Okay.
and then in 2005 I started at Normandale in spring of 2005, so I went right from grad school to teaching at Normandale.
Okay.
And I had always included sexuality as part of my intro psych course that I
Okay.
taught while I was in grad school.
Okay.
And it was kind of always my dream to be able to teach an entire course in human sexuality. And I knew they had one at Normandale, and my friend Dave was teaching it when I showed up. And in fall of 2007, I expressed interest in teaching the class. Dave was okay with sharing it, and so in fall of 2007, I got my own section of it and loved it as much as I thought I would. And then eventually Dave kind of got tired of teaching it, and so I've kind of been the primary person to teach it now for the past, 6-7 years now.
Wow.
Now, on a course like this at Normandale, is it a required course?
No.
Anywhere? Or so the students are seeking this out?
Yes. And the courses that are at Normandale, there are certain transfer curriculum goals that students have to meet if they want, to transfer to a 4-year school. And so different courses meet different goals. And so it does kind of help students towards their degree. But there's lots of other courses that would meet those same goals. So it really is kind of a elective for them.
That's good. But so the students you have in your class, which generally are probably some early ones, 17 up to all ages, have an interest in this. So you've got a wanting to be their captive audience.
It is a very self-selected group. Yeah.
Okay.
How big are these classes?
Well, we've actually experienced some dwindling enrollment, unfortunately, and I can't quite figure out why. But when I first started, we would generally fill the we have day and night sections. So generally every semester there's one day section, one night section. The day section would usually fill at 45. And the night section would also get usually between 30 and 40, somewhere in there.
Okay.
It's dropped off a bit, especially the night enrollments. But I still get usually around 30 for the day and 15 to 20 for the night section.
Okay.
No. What are they? I mean, I know that. What do you think the students are hoping to get out of the class? Because there's been a recent thing in the news and a bit that we'll probably get to later on a local TV show about just the lack of actual sexual education. I mean, and we're not even talking about. I mean, there's a lack of how the plumbing works, but there's also just a lack of how the human emotions work and where everybody fits on that. And do you find that you have to change? I mean, do you have a set syllabus and then have to sort of see where everybody is in the class? Or is everyone just coming from such a point of ignorance that you... I have to admit, I'm making an assumption because there's just so much ignorance out there that they really want to not be ignorant.
Yes. Normandale is a very diverse college, and it's open door. And so, unlike the University of Minnesota, you're getting people who are very well prepared for college, those that are really not so well prepared, and also a great diversity of ages, ethnicities, that kind of thing. And so when I've kind of asked what they were, I usually give them a chance to tell me what they're looking forward to about the class or things they might be concerned about. they often are very kind of vague. They're like, oh, I saw it in the catalog and it looked interesting. So I get the sense that they don't usually come into the course with specific things that they plan to get out of it. It's just like...
They're like,
ooh.
I like sex. Sweet.
Yeah, exactly. And they... I was actually surprised at how savvy most of them already were about certain things. They do tend to be a little overconfident, I think, about what they know. And by the end of the course, they're like, wow, I didn't think I was going to learn this much. And I have a lot of students that tell me every semester at the end that this should be a required class and it's the best class they've ever had, and they tell their friends about it. And
real world skills.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm afraid to ask what quizzes are like. I mean, I'm just wondering.
And the course is taught in the psych department.
Okay.
That varies from college to college. So in some colleges, it's like the health department, or I imagine even biology in some places, or sociology. And sexuality really is interdisciplinary. So, when we talk about anatomy, it gets very biological. But then when we talk about things like attraction, it gets much more psychological. And then when we talk about different differences between different demographic groups, it becomes more sociological. So there are things like, within the African American community, they at least report on anonymous surveys much lower rates of oral sex and masturbation than other ethnic groups. And so that's very sociological when it gets into those details. And so I've kind of had to, broaden my base of knowledge in order to kind of cover those other areas.
Yeah, because with such a diverse group, and I'm wondering if sometimes maybe the diversity might be changing maybe some of the, like who's coming to the school, who's going to be interested in the classes.
Exactly.
Because if you're more conservative, I'm assuming you're going to be less likely to take this course.
One of the things that I feared when I started teaching it was that I was going to have to deal with a lot of really conservative viewpoints and, even some like homophobia and sexism and that kind of thing. And I haven't found that. I found that they're generally very, very accepting. There are a couple areas where they still, I think, struggle. Polyamory is one.
Well, that's a new,
Yeah, I mean, there's actually vocabulary for it now. I mean, I don't even think you could find it in a lot of written stuff a few years ago.
Right, right. And there's also sometimes some slut-shaming type things, too, when we talk about, like I give them anonymous surveys to compare the classes' behaviors with like national norms. They love that. They love kind of finding out, what's the average number of sex partners in the class, and that kind of thing.
Everyone wants to know if they're normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Oh, yeah. And I was wondering if you did any polling to help you within a given class to help figure out exactly where to place your emphasis more intently in a given semester.
But it's pretty subtle. Like I pretty much stick to my plan of topics.
Okay.
But in terms of, areas of emphasis, I kind of do tailor it based on some of the survey results. But there was one time when, although it's kind of an interesting gender reversal, but when I reported the class average for the males, for the number of lifetime sex partners, it was a fairly high number, quite a bit higher than the female number was. And one girl in the class, exclaimed, "That's disgusting." Oh. And so I had to say, well, let's kind of, be mindful about, how we react to some of these numbers. These are, descriptive stats, and we need to be careful not to, be passing judgment on other people. And so there is still some of that slut-shaming kind of thing. But for the most part, there's less diversity in my human sexuality students than I get in, say, intro to psych. It does tend to be a lot of young white females.
In the sexual health?
Yeah.
Okay.
In human sexuality.
Okay.
And with, in general in psych classes, there tends to be more women than men that enroll. But in human sexuality, it's even more skewed to where kind of a typical ratio is a quarter male to three-quarter female. Oh. And which should be more incentive for guys to take the class.
Yeah, they think they know, maybe. I don't know.
Exactly, because I sometimes say, I still haven't figured out why, so many more women than men take this class. And, of course, a lot of the women are like, well, they probably already think they know everything,
Yeah.
But, so, I wish I had more diversity.
Maybe it's just not as exciting, really. Like, they just, I just do that. And, and women,
I want to know more about why.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like I said. I was curious about. I mean, so you said at the end of the class, and they're talking it up. I mean, that's got to be spectacular, and that. You've sent folks out with actual knowledge.
Oh yeah. The first day of the class, I tell them what the class is going to be about and what it's not going to be about. And so I tell them, this is not going to be, a slightly expanded version of typical high school sex ed, where I show scary pictures of STDs and try to scare them out of having sex. That's what that's the sense I get of a lot of high school, middle school sex ed, and the students kind of back me up on that. That still in 2015, there's a lot of that. Either they don't talk about sex in any kind of depth, or it's a lot of scare tactics and
a lot of shaming. Yeah, there's a lot. You do this, you're ruined.
Or they don't talk about sex.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Here's a penis, here's a vagina. Women have periods.
Yeah. And
men have wet spots when they wake up. I mean, the general.
And I ask, I give them assignments, homework assignments, where there's for each assignment there's 5 questions, and they can pick any 2 of those 5. And some of the assignments do kind of ask for some personal information, personal experiences. They're meant to get them to reflect on their own lives, and then the other options are usually more critical thinking type questions. And so I try to make the assignments not busy work. And the students tell me that at first it's kind of awkward writing the assignments, but they tend to enjoy them more and more as the class goes on, because it does get them to reflect on things that they really hadn't thought deeply about. And
they've learned some vocabulary and some terms, and being able to put words to what may be going on in their head,
right?
And going through there. How does popular? I mean, like a popular news story, go into a class. If I mean the director, athletic director at the the U stepping down and stuff like that. Does that work into the courses at all, or is that more of a fight? Someone brings it up after class, or works it into a paper or something like that. Because there's always a sex story out there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and when I've heard of those stories, I do tend to sprinkle them throughout the class to make illustrations of different points. I'll mention something that had been in the news. So we still talk about the Larry Craig airport
white
bathroom.
Stance.
Yeah, the white stance thing, But then when I hear about something more recent, I try to work that into. I find that a lot of students vary widely in terms of how up on current events they are, because a lot of them really are kind of oblivious to what's going on in the news, except for what they see on social networking. So I'm sure they're all very familiar with Caitlyn Jenner, but maybe not so much the athletic director at the U,
Right.
So
yeah, because that's
Do you have more gender conversation these days?
I've expanded that quite a bit, and actually, one thing that surprised me was how much I still had to learn when I started teaching the course. So over the 7-8 years I've been teaching it, I learn new things every semester, oftentimes from the students. And so, like when we talk about contraception and we talk about like birth control pills, I'm not an expert on birth control pills, but a lot of the female students are, and so I've learned things from them as well. And then I've also really learned a lot from my students about transgenderism, and so we talk a lot about those issues now because I've had some trans students in my classes, and just talking to them has really enlightened me a lot, and I've been able to then expand that portion of the course and include more in there. But going back to what you said about how little they actually learn in sex ed, one of the questions they can answer on those assignments is, when did you first learn about the clitoris and what it was? And almost nobody says they learned about it in sex ed at school. Yeah. It's always like the South Park movie. It's like, great. The South Park movie is where they first learned about the clitoris. Yeah. It's like, But in sex ed classes, it has no like functional role in reproduction, so
They don't talk about it.
And it's a
female
source of female pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
so we're not going to talk about that because that'll just turn women into crazy sex fiends. So
Well, I would like to get a couple other examples of some of your critical thinking and your homework questions because I'm fascinated to know what that would be like.
A lot of students, surprisingly enough, on the very first assignment, because you'd think the first assignment they'd be a little more cautious, but a lot of students pick an option where they can reflect on their first time having partnered sex. And I tell them it doesn't have to be intercourse. One of the overarching themes of the class is sex is more than penis and vagina intercourse. And I think a lot of the dysfunction that comes up between opposite sex partners is that idea that it's only really sex if there's penetration by a penis,
Right.
So I have them reflect on their first time, what they thought about sex before, what they thought about it afterwards, and a lot of students will answer that question. They also can reflect on their first orgasm and what that was like. And then there's other ones where it's more of a critical thinking type exercise. I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, I give them the option because there are, because of the multicultural population at Normandale, there are people that grew up in very, very different cultures. And so one assignment option is to compare what sexuality is like in our culture versus the culture that they may have grew up in.
Okay.
And that's always really interesting. So I get students that may have spent the first part of their life in Mexico and then moved here, and they can contrast Mexican norms with U.S. norms. And that's always really interesting.
Have you ever had any Muslim?
I have, actually. And I had a female student as recently that actually, indicated in her assignments that she didn't have a clitoris, that she had underwent, female genital cutting.
Oh my God.
And so that made it very real because it's so easy to
Right.
think, well, that happens over there. But here was a student in my class that had undergone that, and she talked even a little bit about the struggles that she had with her boyfriends
Right.
because
Did she
of
say
that.
how old she was?
She was early 20s.
No, like when she was.
Oh, when the procedure. No, I don't think so.
Wow.
But
Yeah. So when you are taken aback, do you have a process in your head, when you're in class so that you don't react to something that, or has it been like 6-7 years now and there's almost everything's come at you? Because in a retail, we will have people ask us questions. Complete strangers come in and ask questions about our products and what's going on. They just lay out their lives to a stranger. And, learning to react appropriately is part of our training.
Yes.
Going through there.
Very little shocks me. And I've read so widely on the topic. And I find sexual variations fascinating. So I'm familiar with, furries and looners. Those are people who are sexually or sometimes romantically attached to balloons. And there's
Balloons?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a new one for me.
Yeah.
I have
That's
not
exciting.
heard that. So we're not talking Luna as in moon and lunar. We're talking loon as in balloon.
balloon, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's new. That's new.
The static electricity?
Well, for some of them, it's about like when they're blowing up the balloon. There's also an increase in their own arousal while they're blowing it up. But there was one guy.
I need to take this class.
I watched this episode of. Or I've watched several episodes of this series that used to be on, I think, Showtime, maybe, called Strange Sex.
Oh, yeah, I've watched that, yeah.
And that's where I first learned about it. And they profiled this guy who, it wasn't just a sexual thing for him. He actually developed romantic attachments to balloons. And he had 50 of them or whatever at his house. And he would collect more.
What happens when they pop? Does he have to go to grief counseling or what?
Well, exactly. For some people, the popping kind of corresponds
Yeah,
with
with
climax.
yeah,
But for him, he didn't want to pop them because, then they wouldn't be, not alive, but they wouldn't, be balloons anymore. Wow. So,
it's really interesting because generally it's very, very difficult to surprise Liz, and we have now surprised Liz.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the first time.
I think
35 episodes it took, but we did it.
We need to write this down. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
No, I can see that. I mean, this is why, like I said, I was going back and forth with Dave or, folks, because, we can come in here and I can talk about the latest vibrator or lube and, and I can talk about, communication and stuff like that. But it's nice to know that, that there's someone actually that, got a degree in it. I get this. You are a sex educator. So when I hear, a lot of times I hear the word sex educator thrown around a lot, and it drives me crazy in the retail world. And so I like when there's real people that know what they're talking about.
I've gone to Pipe Dream University. I have my certificate.
Yeah.
No, it's just because you know how a vibrator works does not mean that you're a sex educator. You need to, it's a lot more than that.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I really need you to back up and explain furries to me because I don't get it.
You don't?
No, I really don't.
Well, there's two types.
Well, yeah, there's like furries and plushies.
Yeah.
Is that what you're? Yeah. Where plushies are sexually aroused by like rubbing up against stuffed animals, and I guess it's like the texture kind of thing.
Okay.
Whereas furries, I guess the full term is fursuit fetish. And so that's where they like dressing up as animals.
Okay.
And they're usually kind of plush, fluffy outfits.
Like a mascot.
Yeah. But with certain holes
Mm-hmm.
that mascot uniforms don't usually have.
And then there's two. You either like to be the mascot or
you're attracted to
the mascot.
Sure. And I guess, both could enjoy dressing up. And there's conventions.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's not, so
one
it's not purely...
one was attacked with someone dumped a bunch of chlorine gas at a place in Chicago because people are so freaked out by this. And there's no way that it was an accident in a stairwell.
Yeah.
Nobody has, spills chlorine in a stairwell. So, but they had to go across the street to a dog show and hang out. So I thought that's the part. That's the part that I thought was interesting is the fact that there's this other venue going on and there's all your Dobermans and German Shepherds and your poodles and your, all the other dogs, and they're doing that, and then suddenly all the furries come over because they needed a safe place to be while they, cleaned up the other hotel.
It's really not that different from Comic-Con, where people dress up as their favorite superhero. I mean, with the furry community, it's social as much as it is sexual. And there's also cosplay, where people like to dress up in costumes, in sexual contexts. And we don't know where this originates from, how it starts. That's the case with most fetishes, is people often can't pinpoint exactly where it started. It just seems like it's something that they discovered, and it's deeply ingrained in their sexual template.
And what I find is that, there are some people who do sexualize certain things like that, like cosplay, and then there are others that don't. And because people glom on always to any of the sexual aspect of it, you end up with a lot of harassment sometimes because they figure if you've dressed up, for some reason you're asking for it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and so I
think it's also the global internet has provided a way for it. Might have been that like you lived in Minnesota and there was like two other people that were into this and you would never find them. But now you just have to go to this one website and you can find all of them all over the world, and then you can all get together.
Yeah.
And so it makes for these obscure fetishes. It gives them an area so they're no longer obscure.
Oh, yeah. One of the class discussions that we have every semester is, how has the internet been good for sexuality and bad for sexuality? And obviously the bad is sexual predators, finding underage people online. Yeah. But one of the positives is you can now find like-minded people, and you can actually, get that social support and community that you wouldn't have been able to have before.
Yeah, so. Like that one website for cheaters,
Like, the
Ashley. Well, no, because that sort of segues a little bit into something I saw about, a study I saw about sexting, in which they were saying, everyone focuses on the negative. Obviously the athletic director or someone or teenagers doing this and that. But when you get to age-appropriate consent, adults that that are in a relationship, sexting back and forth, it can enhance a relationship. Okay. And I'm always fascinated, again, about how you have to age appropriate consent, respect. I mean, no matter how much you have, about 1,000 different conversations, and it comes back to some of these basic concepts.
Yeah, people have a hard time with gray areas and ambiguity. And so when it comes to sexting, it's either all good or it's all bad. But I read another study where even among teenagers, the only type of sexting that was associated with negative outcomes was unwanted sexting. So if they were teenagers who were in a committed relationship, then there really didn't seem to be anything, wrong with sending each other pictures that were, wanted and or
so it's that
solicited.
Girl that has a crush on a guy and is just sending him pictures, and he's like, "What?"
Or a lot of my female students have been the unwanted recipients of male
crotch
pictures.
shots,
penis pictures.
It's like we want
that
to
kind
see
of,
that.
Yeah. I mean, there's still this weird mentality of a lot of males where they think that women want to see that, and that it will make the women want to date them after they've seen.
It's like chat roulette. It's like most of it you go through.
I'm surprised they just haven't made a Tinder or something that's just dick pics.
Yeah.
Why don't they just absolutely distill it down to just the dick pic, and you can swipe left or right or whatever you want to do, and you don't even need to know the rest. Honestly, if that worked, it would exist.
Yeah.
It's going,
Well, I think men would like that, but I just don't think women will like.
Once again, okay, I need to trademark that. That's how I'm going out in the world. I'm going to app for just dick pics.
No, I asked my female students in class just very informally. Do you actually find penises, just isolated penises, attractive? No. They really don't.
No, the V. On an ab, like the belt with the V. Yeah, that's hot. I could look at that. Yeah.
I mean, some of the shots we have fun with bodies. And we, on our website on Mondays, we do a Man Meet Monday, and we do Equal Opportunity Wild Woman Wednesdays, because we put up some pictures. But it is rare that it's not going to be just a dick pic.
No.
No, that's just not going to do anything.
Well, that also wouldn't really fly on Facebook.
No, it wouldn't fly. we have enough problems with them getting to with promoting stuff. I mean, I would give Facebook more money if they would accept our post, but we can't. They're so restrictive.
Christian.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, like, the role in the last several years too, because especially when you started around 04, 05, that online dating has. What kind of a spin has that put on the material and the things that get covered? I
don't really address online dating all that much. I mean, it comes up in the discussion of the internet and the positives and negatives of it, and how people that really don't like going to clubs and bars, now there's an outlet that's become more and more accepted as a legitimate. Early on it was like people were weirded out by the whole online dating thing.
Yeah, I know several married couples now. They're very happy.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They met there. And I'm like, really? But it's only now that they're saying that's where they met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it took a while.
Yeah.
It took a while. I'm a 6-year match couple. So, and our neighbors are in their mid to upper 60s. They met on Match in 2003 and have been married for 13 years. So, and they were like really early adopters, or adapters. Yeah, adopters. What? So, no, I have a question for you too, though. I mean, Colleen had a question here talking about changing attitudes in popular culture and affecting the class. All of a sudden, when the lid came off of gay marriage, and I mean, what just an avalanche. It started, and then it's boom. And now all of a sudden, the transsexual and transgender stuff is coming up. I mean, what do you do when you see these events coming, and how much adjustment do you make?
I try not to let like popular culture's views influence me too much. Like two of my, like on the first day I tell the students there are two things I want you to get from the class. I want you to get good, accurate information based on good research, and good research doesn't include surveys in Cosmo. No. And
or Men's Health. I was just looking at one.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I get them in because people sometimes say I saw this toy, and so I need to know what it is. But I look through the stuff and I go, oh.
Good information, dispel myths that are still out there, and also to increase their comfort levels with sex. And so I still kind of talk about homosexuality the same way that I did when I first started teaching the class, where it's still only a handful of states that allow gay marriage. Mm-hmm. So it really hasn't influenced me too much, just because I stick with what the research shows.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And like I said, because it's a self-selected group, even back the first semester I taught it, they were already very accepting of gays and lesbians, GLBT issues already. Mm-hmm. Maybe not as much with the T, but that has definitely grown over the years.
Right.
A lot of it is just, people fear the unknown, and through the class they find out more about it and what terms actually mean, and that tends to increase their comfort levels and attitudes, increase positive attitudes towards
Which is
things.
probably one of the reasons people fight education, because if you teach someone something, they can no longer be afraid of it.
Yeah.
They can no longer demonize it. Because it is fascinating. I mean, I now know that the Minneapolis schools, for example, that the kids at least at my daughter's school all know how to put a condom on a banana, and I'm thrilled about that. But I don't. But you try and figure out what else they're taught, and there's just no way she's talking to a parent, and so just trying to find good sources and stuff like that, and I can so it's good that this exists, and too bad something like this doesn't exist it isn't mandatory.
Well,
right.
How much access are you seeing people have to porn before 18 now that the internet is,
It's kind of hard to say. I don't really ask them how old they were when they first saw something pornographic. I think that'd be a little scary, actually, and kind of depressing, maybe. But they are generally pretty familiar with it already. A little icebreaker I do on the first day is basically it's like a scavenger hunt where I have a whole bunch of characteristics listed on a sheet of paper, and they have to go around the room and find somebody that fits a characteristic, and they can only use a given person once. So it forces them to mingle,
okay.
And it's kind of a fun way just to kind of break the ice. And one of the characteristics I have on there has never seen more than a minute or two of pornography. And at most, there's maybe like one person in a given class who can actually say that they've never seen
it's the
more
unicorn. I got it.
Exactly.
I found it.
Exactly.
And these are typically, are most of your students, especially the day classes, in the 18, like freshmen?
Oh, yeah. So that's another interesting issue is the day classes are usually 18, 19, 20-year-olds, pretty fresh out of high school.
Right.
The night class is much more diverse, a lot of older students, and a lot more maturity. So maturity is one of the challenges of teaching the class. That's one reason why Dave backed away from it, because he couldn't handle the immaturity of the day classes anymore. Whereas
That could get old. I can see that.
Yeah. But I can be pretty juvenile at times too, though.
Awesome.
Well, that's what keeps us young longer.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. I
think we should all audit this class.
Yeah. I think so too.
And so there certainly is a place for humor, but there's also a place for being serious about the issues. And some of the students have a hard time switching modes. But for my night classes, those have been some of the most rewarding classes that I've taught, because they're generally very mature. They can appreciate the humor, but for the most part, they treat sex seriously, and so many different perspectives because the age ranges are much greater for the night classes.
Right.
That's
And the experience and all that,
So, Colleen, we've got to I think we can link this. I think it'll be okay. The John Oliver last week tonight.
Oh, I already put it on.
Did you get it up there? Okay. Oh, my God. This is, if people, audience, I'm telling you, if you haven't seen this is absolutely screaming hilarious, but it's also kind of sad because he shows real news feature packages from different states and about controversies in, K through 12 sexual education stuff. Once you get to college, different ball game, right?
Well, they don't have any authority over that, so.
Yeah, and so but it differs differs from state to state, you know, and all of that sort of thing. So he really does this entire 22-ish minutes.
Yes, it's worth every second.
And, you know, they showed clips of some of the abstinence-only instructors. Oh my God. I mean, you want to talk about Nurse Ratched meets Cruella de Vil. I mean, they were terrifying, these women.
Yeah, it was screaming and shame.
Yeah.
Screaming and shame. And I'm sure that's what you get on your surveys that they got from such. I mean, there were some states where you can't even show a condom in class. And so one teacher, this is spectacular, he uses a sock putting on his foot to show, because he's trying desperately, since he cannot say the word condom, he cannot show a condom, there's nothing he can do, and he's trying anything he can to get any sort of knowledge to his students. I mean, and so he's saying, you know, leave a little bit at the top, put it on, roll it all the way up, and then slip it, you know, and then only then can you put it in the shoe, and then you don't, then you don't put it in another shoe. I mean, it's just a little clip. But I mean, when I think about, I don't know when this was filmed or anything like that, but it's like, I want to send that guy a Starbucks gift card because he's working so hard
within the system,
and he is so hamstrung by what he can teach students. I thought it was an amazing piece. Or the I'm blanking on the young woman's name who was abducted, who felt that
Elizabeth Smart.
Yeah, who said that she had a chance a couple times to get away, but she'd been told by an instructor that if she had sex, she was a used-up piece of gum, and who's going to want her? And so, you know, when you see stuff, I mean, that's what's being taught to children.
Oh, and the other PSAs that they should, or films that were used in sex classes. If anybody's a Breaking Bad fiend in the room, I definitely am. But Jonathan Banks, who plays Mike, they had a clip of him from, like, I don't know,
he
the 60s.
He was a teenager. Yeah, he was a teenager.
Like the 60s, in one of these preposterous, and then they feature that, and then they bring him back for later. I'm not going to spoil it because you got to watch it, but it's toward the end of the segment. But I thought it was a fascinating piece. And the one when he was talking about the nasty, you know, the abstinence only people, he's like, what are they trying to do? Yell the horniness out of teenagers? Yeah. Like, really? How effective is that? And it's like, do you think that as a society, Chuck, that we are fighting the tide of human nature too much with the way that we try to control this in school?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the research bears that out. If you look at the states that have the highest rates of unplanned pregnancies and STIs, it's the states that pushed abstinence-only education.
Right. It's like that chlamydia outbreak in Texas, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was a recent event that I mentioned in my classes. That, you know, and that was a high school that was abstinence-only. And there's also, you know, teenagers find ways to rationalize it. So if the message they get is, I can't have sex, and sex is defined as penis and vagina, rates of anal and oral sex have gone up. So, so it kind of backfires. Yeah. And then there's also studies showing that states that switch to a comprehensive sex ed program have seen drops in STIs and teen pregnancies. And yet, the conservatives still try to push the idea that, no, we need to keep the children from...
Right. Well, hasn't Teen Mom been actually successful at lowering teen pregnancy?
Yeah, people were really afraid that was going to do it. And there's the book out, one of the books that was available to read for a summer English project was The Pregnancy Project, in which the teenage girl faked pregnancy just to see how people would treat her. Oh. And it got turned into a Lifetime movie or something like that too. But it was amazing because she came from a family where people just expected her to get knocked up as a teenager. And just what was said about her and the shaming and this and that. And she's like, you think you're going to shame someone? I mean, if you destroy someone so much, they're going to think that's the only thing that they can do. Is, which is why so many girls, they're not given any help in school. They got, all this sort of stuff. So of course they just go have another baby because that's what they're told that they're good for.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really, really frustrating. And so as a parent of a teenager, I'm trying to figure out how do I get this, across it, so it's been an ongoing thing. I mean, I'm never going to sit down and have a talk because it happened from when she was a kid.
Yeah.
We're going.
Oh yeah, I have my kid yesterday pulled his pants down and said, "What is this?" and gestured to his testicles. and what are they for? And I'm like, well, and then all of a sudden I'm like talking about the change and
well, yeah,
that's like every day. Every day I try to use the bathroom. Why are you sitting?
Yeah, the idea of having the talk as if it's a one-time thing that's going to give them all the information that they need is really ridiculous. It needs to be an ongoing conversation.
The changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure she's no longer asking how it happens. She's probably asking, when? When do I know? You know?
It is really frustrating because you just like, okay, because I mean, not once. I mean, for a family, that I, grew up in the, with fantasy gifts as stores, did my parents ever have the talk with me, which just cracks me up to no end.
That is pretty.
But my mom was a nurse, and I forget, all three of us managed to figure it out.
One of you really well.
My sister has 4 kids. Yes. And I thought about that, and I mean, I think even if by any chance we didn't sell, what we do, and I had a florist shop, I'm pretty sure I would have gone with the same process. That it's an ongoing thing, because you just see all of the shame that gets shoved on girls, and then all of the expectations that get shoved on boys, and I think that's as damaging.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, not dismissing the fact that all that stuff screws up boys too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you got to be cool. You got to have multiple partners. Yeah.
And just the idea that men are supposed to be able to just know how to please any woman and be able to mind read, because
right. And that women expect that. That women,
right.
I shouldn't have to tell you
exactly
how to,
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I make the point about how striking it is that sex is everywhere in our culture, but people can't talk openly about it. And I had a student, I think this last semester that was like, I was studying for class, somewhere public, and, our textbook has some pretty, explicit images in it. And they started to feel really kind of self-conscious because other people could see what they were studying. And then so they were going to, put it away. And then they thought, but wait a minute, this is one of the things Chuck's trying to teach us, is that we shouldn't be, taking this perfectly, appropriate material about sexuality and hide that, and just let the movies and TV and music, be full of
it's
sex.
not about
sitting in a bathtub. Yeah.
Well, I mean, those are
yeah.
trying to explaining what that is doing, because it came on where my daughter and I happen to be NCIS junkies. So if you're watching that, when I used to have cable on USA, about every other commercial is Viagra Cialis, and so you're like, this is what it's for, and she just looks at me like ew. But she was like 9.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna not tell her what it is.
Right.
I mean, obviously, once again, in an age-appropriate manner.
Right.
This is what it's used for.
And it thrills me when I'll have a student say that they have now started telling all their friends what they're learning in class. Nice. And so they're like carrying the information from the class to their friends. One female student last semester was at like a hair salon getting her hair done, and she brought her book in. And the people at the salon, other customers, and the workers there started asking her about it, and she was more than happy to tell them.
And we get that.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of questions too. I know an awful lot about my friends that I don't think other people would probably know about their friends. But I'm sort of, like I said, I'm honored. I a lot of times I say, well, this is what I know about this particular product, but I can't tell you about. That's not my expertise. I say you have to go find someone that you can talk to, about stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Like I said, having an. There's real sex educators out there, and I'm sitting across from one.
Yeah. Well, you brought up something that I've been kind of curious about earlier on in the show. I stumbled across Showtime After Dark and the show about polyamory, and they've got 2 seasons out. I guess I haven't seen I don't even know if they're going to do a 3rd season, but I'm like, okay, and I kept watching it. I watched both seasons to try to see if I could come to some sort of an understanding of this whole thing and relate to it at all. And I can't. I mean, and I'm not saying that they're horrible people, but I just can't imagine, as humans, the way we're wired, how that could possibly work. And I just kind of wanted to get some of your thoughts on the concept and all of that.
How much time do we have?
Yeah, I know it's a big one, but.
But you think humans are wired for monogamy, though?
Well, I
Or do you think they're wired to be selfish? Because I know that's what I'm wired to be.
I just can't see. I mean, every time, and I've watched 2 of the relationships totally implode. I mean, when there's somebody gets jealous, and they, something goes. It's just hard.
Well, the counter argument is that there's plenty of jealousy in monogamous relationships as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one analogy I've heard is, can you imagine a parent saying, "Well, I can only love one child." Mm-hmm. No, parents can love all their children. And so the argument is that, well, we can extend that to adult romantic relationships. That, we idealize this romantic notion of falling in love with only one person, and people still talk about finding the one that doesn't exist. There is no one. There's something close to one that we round up to one. There is no perfect soulmate out there for us. And so I kind of get, I would have a hard time doing it myself because it's so much more work. Emotionally, and you have to be so open and communicative, and you have to do so much processing with all of your partners so that everything is out in the open and everyone is on the same page. That in some ways monogamy is easier. Yeah. But if you look at evolution, we're probably wired for temporary monogamy. The idea being that children, human offspring, are very vulnerable compared to the offspring of other species. Mm-hmm. And so they're very helpless and they need a lot of care. And so it was in our best interest for the mother and the father to help to partner in raising the child up until the point where the child could start, fending for themselves. And so I don't think lifelong monogamy is what we're built for. Mm-hmm. That's more of a choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, you look at the gorillas, Schroeder at Como, he's got 3 girlfriends.
Oh, yeah.
No, I know several separate groups of polyamorous, and it's been long-term. Mm-hmm. Some of them live in different states, which makes it easier because they can figure out their times and stuff like that. But they're just said, I'm perfectly capable of loving more than one person. Mm-hmm. And and I'm like, I don't expect that most people are going. You're right. There is no one. I mean, there's probably dozens and dozens of people out there that you could round up to the one.
But I think,
if one person's living in Nepal and you're here, you're not going to meet that person.
Right.
You're going to meet the one that's closest to you.
That people don't understand is that the relationships aren't. It's not a big orgy.
Right.
They are separate relationships. They're just coexisting at the same time.
Right.
So I could have a husband and I can have a boyfriend, but the husband and the boyfriend are not boyfriends.
Right.
In one set, they had that going
happen.
on.
Oh, yeah.
And there was definite,
I think that's probably where the jealousy comes in.
Yeah.
Well, it's more time.
Yeah, and they did. And I watched the same stuff that happens creep into these. They say they're all zen about it and everything else, and then they have some of the same petty fights and stuff that I do, So it was really kind of I don't get it. But,
No, I mean, I think it takes someone who is less jealous and is probably just a much more accepting person, because they can, they got their life and I got my life and we got a life over here and we all work out together. I mean, logically I can figure it out, but I also know that my brain's too selfish. I want mine. I don't want to share.
It just seems like so much work. I read a para romance novel, and this woman has 12 boyfriends, and it's oh, thank you. I mean, sometimes it's no longer hot. It's supposed to be, and it's just really? Oh gosh.
Yeah, and some of my skepticism comes from knowing about the chemicals that are released when people engage in sexual relationships, close romantic relationships. There are hormones like oxytocin, and those are designed to promote bonding. It's what promotes bonding in breastfeeding between mother and infant. And the same hormones are stimulated when adults have sex with each other, and even just hugging can release that oxytocin. And so you might say that, well, I'm committed to you, but I will sometimes want to have sex with this other person. Well, your brain might release those same chemicals with the other person. And then at some point you might, think, well, maybe I want this other person to be my primary partner. And So I think things can get messy that way.
Yeah.
But I also think there's tremendous individual differences where some people can keep things compartmentalized very well.
It's like those men that have 2 families.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my God. That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, there's and
they never know about each other. I mean, that's
half the Lifetime
polyamory.
movies, right?
Oh.
Yeah, half the Lifetime movies. Yeah.
That's
I think that has to do with more with power and getting things away, and ego. Whereas folks that are open and stuff like that, because I mean, I'm just like, what's wrong with more love? I mean, if we really work it out, I'm not. I just find that I find it fascinating that what don't we know? Transgenderism, a whole bunch of stuff is in public now is being more accepted. I'm wondering in 5 years what term we're going to learn about that we don't. That is not part of the popular culture. What's left?
Do you see anything coming on the horizon, Chuck? Is there anything that you're hearing from the bowels of research that we might want to watch for?
Not anything in particular. I do think that we're going to hear more and more about polyamory.
Yeah, I think so too.
That they're kind of people who are in a polyamory are kind of viewing that as the next big civil rights issue. Now that we've kind of crossed a tipping point for gay rights.
They're really concerned about legalities, especially when there's children involved.
Yeah.
So I think at some point there's gonna be an issue that's gonna crop up, and they're gonna want to be able to legalize their entire relationship because they have children and homes and
health insurance. Sometimes it's really a lot about health insurance.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, it definitely is. So that's a pretty interesting. I'm just wondering how that's really that much different from swinging.
Well, I think swinging is temporary partners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? In a polyamorous relationship, you have committed relationships with multiple people.
Okay.
Yeah, swinging is more recreational, I think.
Okay.
That you have your partner, and then you
Right.
have fun. Whereas this is like you have this partner and you have that partner, and then that person might have that partner, and
because I think at most swinging parties, singles are not welcome. You need to.
No, it
we
depends.
learned differently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, all right.
No,
Okay.
well,
I think they have to be invited.
they have to be invited. Yeah, you're not just showing up.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Whereas
a friend.
a couple could probably.
Yeah, there's still sort of
Depending on the
because
group,
each person that brings someone new into the group. I wasn't here for the day when we had Mrs. Sin in, and it was just fascinating because they're it's nobody sort of like wakes up one morning. They just sort of fall into it. They hear about it. They talk about it, and then they meet another couple, and then they might go out a little bit. And then they'll bring them into the larger group, and then they meet other people, and then it becomes very sort of close because a lot of folks that they're old friends that don't swing sort of fall to the wayside because they found a much more accepting.
Well, and then
group.
like she likes single men.
Okay.
And her husband, did her husband like to watch?
They play separately generally.
Yeah,
she said.
she said they don't. Yeah, so therefore she would want single men to come to the party.
Okay.
But
So
like I said,
I think it
each
depends on the kink of the
Sure.
individual
Sure.
and the individual group, right? If you have
Right.
if you have a bunch of people that all just like to swap wives, then you wouldn't need.
Right.
Because then there would be too many penises.
There
right?
would be.
Okie dokie. Well, guys, let's do this. We're getting close to the end of our time here. Since we've got Chuck Nikles in, let's just run through a couple of really quick news stories. Which, Colleen, quite frankly, you did almost the whole entire roundup this week.
I spent a lot of time just sort of. I didn't have anything that I had to do this weekend, so being a big fat lump and surfing the web was part of it.
you went and got pie.
Well, there was pie. I drove
was
down
some
to
pie.
it's the big yellow barn down in 169 with all the candy and the pie and all that. Johnson's apple pie. I don't know. All I know is the best pie ever.
Oh, that sounds good.
I now judge all pie to this pie. I did this all pie. Yeah, just it. I did, yeah.
You've set an impossible standard. That's not fair to the other pie. Pretty soon there's going to be magazine covers, and then all the other pie is going to feel bad.
Yes. I don't know. I will shame other pie because this pie is
I need to go to this pie place.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
spectacular.
no kidding. Well, anytime good old Ron Jeremy makes news, you gotta.
The hedgehog.
Oh yeah, but you know what? He has become such a little institution around Hollywood. I mean, he's like as popular as some of the other A-listers. And
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
He's out there now talking about your blood pressure, which bah. But anyway, okay, I won't take the sophomoric route here. He had an aortic dissection, and said, it was almost, death for him. And he's become a health freak. And he talks about how he just really felt great being fat until he didn't.
Yeah.
And so he's really promoting blood pressure right now. And it's just kind of funny. He still dabbles in, I didn't mean that. That sounds, but the occasional porn film, but he's just got so many other things going on. And let's just be honest, probably enough money to where he just kind of hangs out in his nail-lister now.
He does a lot of, he's been in a lot of movies. He does a lot of personal appearances. And there was actually, I think you can find it on Netflix or someplace else or video on demand somewhere. They did a documentary on his recovery after his aortic dissection because he sort of knew that he had bad blood pressure and all that sort of stuff, and that really didn't have to do with the dissection. That's just a genetic defect, and but he's like, he didn't want to take it because he was afraid he couldn't get it up.
Yeah.
And now that he almost died, he's like, you know what? I rather would be alive.
Yeah.
And this is Ron Jeremy saying, I would rather be alive. And and I've seen some pictures of him. He's a lot less puffy.
Yeah.
And he looks great. And I've met him a few times. He's really a nice guy because he's been at shows and stuff like that. But he's but part of his thing is to get people to know what the hell their blood pressure is and get appropriate medication because he goes, it's a lot more fun being alive.
Yeah. And if you want to check out the documentary, it's called Ron Jeremy, Life After the Buffet. Okay. So you can look for that. So Colleen, what were you doing on Craigslist when you found the dildo mobile?
Oh, no. That was
I just need to understand.
A friend's brother sent that to her.
Okay.
Tara in the office.
Is
Her
this
brother sent
different
it to her.
than the lady with the truck?
No. This is Tara got sent a picture from Craigslist from her brother who was looking for something. I don't know.
But her brother who lives in Florida?
I think so, yeah. Okay. Florida, this is right. And as a landlord took over an apartment, they had to kick someone out, but the person behind it left behind all their dildos.
Like 10 of them.
10 of them. And so the person made a mobile out of them.
Oh,
yeah.
No.
I was thinking like
a vehicle.
No.
Like they took one of those Oscar Mayer.
Yeah, right?
A large hanging mobile. It's and it is really well done. We've got pictures of, and it's like.
And they were selling it on Craigslist.
They were trying to sell it on Craigslist.
Why did we not buy it?
Because we can't find a price. I don't know where the pictures came from and all that. But it was like 10 foot long, all this wire and metal bars and C clamps that were holding the dildos, and there are all sorts of different ones. And all I kept thinking is, I really hope they touched him with gloves before they washed him. I mean, I just have this thing like, why? But and it was hanging like in a, they made it and it was hanging like a townhome. I don't know what it was, but it now has to be moved because the space that it's in needs to be used for something else. And they were trying to sell it. So I kept thinking that, I'm like, but if we got it, it would set off our motion detectors in all the stores. Because I'm thinking the downtown store, we could definitely hang this mobile in.
Well, that would be a tourist attraction.
Well, I was like, maybe we have to make our
I think you could get this. I think you could get the
maybe if
the
I get
armor security to put the motions.
Yeah, because it's not like I'm going to have Spider-Man coming or ninjas coming in through the roof, through the top of the apartments that are above us.
No.
But it just, oh my God, it made me laugh. Because I'm like, someone spent...
Almost like that chandelier, that penis-shaped chandelier we found.
Yeah. So I didn't understand the difference between the commas and the periods when it came to European money. So I thought I didn't realize it was a $3,000 fixture.
Oh my God!
I thought it was like $320.
And we're like, you would have gone for it.
I would have gone for the $320 crystal
chandelier shaped like a penis.
That's outstanding.
And I was gonna hang. And then I realized, oh no, I'm not spending $3,000.
Was it 3,000 or is it 3,000 euros?
It's 3,000 euros,
which is
even more. Would have been about 4,500.
Yeah.
I'm like,
oh my God!
But I was like, oh God, you guys look what I found, and I inquired about it, custom, and then I got the thing and went, oh, I got to remember about that comma period. I think it's a little different.
Slightly. Look for the dildo mobile on Craigslist if you have any interest, and if you find a price, give us a Facebook shout out, and we'll get back to you. Just this one killed me. This is our perv of the week. Hat trick. Arrested for obscenity 3 times in 1 week in Metairie, I don't know how to pronounce it, Louisiana, yanking off in his front yard. Three times in 1 week, public obscenity.
And once again, I have to go, not Florida? Because really, we all know that most of the stuff happens in Florida.
So he's masturbating on his front lawn?
Yeah.
And that's... So you can't do that? But you're on
Is that wrong?
You're on your own property?
Yeah, I think if maybe
you can't be nude on your own property.
I think you can't be visibly nude on your own property.
Okay.
From the outside. Remember the guy that stood in the door, Liz? Were you on the show with us that day where we looked at the video? The guy that would stand in his screen door naked. Mm-hmm. And they were really having trouble finding the right way to charge him, and the neighbors were just having a cow. I mean,
I mean, I suppose if you had high enough fence in your backyard and you wanted, and I mean, you just need to be able to masturbate out of sight.
Okay. He's in a lawn chair in the driveway.
That was one of them.
Next time under the carport.
Yeah, that's a little too obvious.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we could use a little more discretion.
Three times. I mean, I'm surprised. I mean, that means that once he got out of booking, he just pretty much went and whipped it out again.
He obviously is getting a lot of endorphin because he's an exhibitionist.
Yes.
And the only way he can get this level of endorphins is from doing this. So he is obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do we have somebody that walks around our store and, wants to,
Yeah, we occasionally.
Because it's part of that,
It is. I mean, when I worked at actually just public in general, when I worked at Donaldson's, we had to tell people to put it back in their pants. And this was in the China department.
Yeah.
And
we did have a customer that was comparing his penis to the various, dildos on the wall, like right up next to it. I mean, I thought it was really funny because, it wasn't sexual. He was like, apparently his wife wanted something slightly bigger. I don't know.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
No, it does kill. I mean, it is rare, but just like any other business. And it just, some people think, or they will think that it's appropriate to make, you can ask questions, but it's how you ask. And I'm assuming it's the same way in the class. There's no bad question. It's tone.
Right.
Going through there, trying to figure it out, and
trying to. Well, then it's probably also how you react to somebody's answers. Like that one lady that said disgusting, and you can't do that.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
We can't have an open discussion if you're gonna.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're gonna shame people. Well, today is Tuesday, which is show day for the Great Northern Sex Cast. But it's also, if you can swing by Burbank, California, and swing through Sardo's. This is the cheers of the porn world. Tuesday night is Porn Star Karaoke Night. Okay? And this has been going on for 12 years. And it's kind of funny, and you think of all these people that you usually, with their clothes on doing something else than you're used to seeing them do. That sounds mildly entertaining. But what I thought was striking, Colleen, about this article that you found is that the industry is quite depressed in Los Angeles now.
Bad.
Like really bad. That their permits for adult film productions in LA County has fallen more than 90% just since 2012, from about 500 permits a year to down to 36 in 2014 and 40 in 2013.
They have to figure out how to make money on porn again.
Really?
Yeah. Well, they make it,
so much
and then somebody steals it, and then you get it.
Yeah, it's all pirated and it's put on for free.
I mean, if you think about our sales and videos, like they've dropped, 70% since
not
08?
quite that much, but awfully darn close. Yeah, because people just can get it online.
Or stream it?
Yeah. No, but it's free. It's
okay.
Free.
Okay.
One person will buy a movie and they will just download it and put it on their YouTube site or any other place for free, and it's just pirated like crazy.
Yep. And until
where's the FBI with a $250,000 fine? Hello?
Yeah, because there's tens of thousands of people doing this all over the world.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And
it's the internet's global, so you get some guy in Ukraine doing it, and Ukraine doesn't give it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just and these companies, I mean, they make a couple of bucks, but they certainly don't have. Someone's going to prosecute. I mean, Disney's going to go after someone.
Yeah.
They've got the backing, and someone's going to do that.
Right.
But if you go to a district attorney someplace in Oklahoma and say there's a server somewhere in your county that's doing this, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, they're not. They're perfectly fine with this person maybe going out of business.
Yeah. The production companies have all consolidated as much as they can, and then they've all branched into something else.
Okay.
Yeah, there's lubricants,
lube, toys, whatever
lingerie.
they can do. Yeah. They've gotten other streams of revenue.
Okay.
Because they're not making,
This also ties back into the problems with sex education in our country, is that while they've been pushing abstinence only, pornography has become so widely accessible that there are a lot of kids who are getting their impressions about what sex is like from porn.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually glad that the students that self-select into my class, they generally, know the difference.
Yeah,
and
it's like learning driving from Fast and Furious. These
Exactly.
things are not the same. It's fast.
And one of their assignments they can pick is to, kind of talk about how porn portrays sex unrealistically, and they generally, do a pretty good job of that. But I'm sure there are other kids out there who, they think this is the way it works, and that women actually enjoy the pile driver on a regular basis.
Well,
And,
there is porn, and there are some production companies that are trying to do realistic sex. So they use real couples with no script. Yes, it's still in front of a camera crew, so that part is, but at least the sex itself is more of a natural progression. You know, as opposed to, okay, at 20 seconds, you're going to do this. At 25, you're going to,
And even, people in the industry will talk about how what is not shown, and that does bother them a little bit because there's so much prep that is that's not seen. Yeah. So, Well, Chuck Nikles, will you come back sometime?
I would love to.
Okay, this is so great. Professor and teaching human sexuality at Normandale College. We're a little bit over time here, so Liz and Colleen, awesome talking with you as usual, and we'll be back next week with number 36.
Thank you.